The Patriots have just wrapped up one of the most important evaluation periods of the entire offseason, and what happened behind the scenes at the NFL Combine could quietly shape the direction of this franchise heading into the 2026 season. Multiple high-profile prospects met directly with the organization, and when you start connecting the dots between those meetings, the positions involved, and the current roster situation, it becomes very clear that the Patriots are preparing for some serious decisions that could affect both the short-term competitiveness and the long-term identity of this team. One of the names that immediately stands out is edge rusher Cassius Howell, a player whose production trajectory alone makes him one of the most intriguing defensive prospects connected to New England so far. Howell's journey is fascinating because he didn't just emerge out of nowhere. He produced early in his career at Bowling Green, where he recorded 9.5 sacks and generated 40 quarterback pressures in a single season, showing flashes of disruptive ability that NFL teams crave. But it was his progression at Texas A&M that really tells the story of his development. In 2024, he delivered 40 tackles and 4 sacks, but in 2025, everything elevated. He finished with 31 tackles, an impressive 11.5 sacks, 41 pressures, and 6 pass breakups, demonstrating not just pass rushing ability, but also awareness and versatility. And that's where this becomes extremely relevant to the Patriots. This team has been searching for a true game-changing edge presence, someone capable of consistently reaching double-digit sack numbers. The lack of a dominant pass rusher has been a noticeable issue, and Howell's production suggests he could potentially fill that void. But there's a complication, and it's one that NFL evaluators are taking very seriously. Arm length. Howell measured with arms just over 30 inches, and historically, that measurement has raised concerns for edge defenders trying to win consistently at the NFL level. The reality is simple. Longer arms often allow pass rushers to disengage from blockers more effectively. And when you're facing elite offensive tackles every week, those physical margins matter. Still, Howell's meeting with the Patriots wasn't just routine. He spoke openly about the interaction, emphasizing how intentional and clear the coaching staff was during their conversation. That detail matters because it signals mutual interest. This wasn't just the Patriots doing background work. This was an intentional evaluation of someone who could realistically be in play when New England makes its first selection. But Howell wasn't the only defensive lineman drawing attention. The Patriots also met with defensive tackle Nick Barrett out of South Carolina, and this meeting could carry deeper implications than it appears on the surface. Barrett brings a completely different profile. At 6'3" and 322 pounds, he represents size, strength, and interior presence. At only 22 years old, he already offers the kind of physical maturity that allows defensive tackles to contribute early in their careers. While his sack totals may not jump off the page, that's not the primary role for many interior defensive linemen. What matters more is disruption, pressure, creation, and athletic ability relative to size. And here's where things get interesting. The Patriots already have interior defensive linemen, including Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. But Barrett's meeting suggests the team is evaluating depth and possibly preparing for uncertainty. There are questions surrounding Barmore's long-term future with the organization, including contract considerations, cap implications, and internal concerns. That uncertainty alone makes Barrett's evaluation far more meaningful. This isn't just about adding depth. This could be about protecting the defensive line's future stability. At the same time, the Patriots' repeated focus on edge defenders shows a clear priority. They also met with Zion Young, another edge rusher who delivered solid production, including 42 tackles, 16.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, and 52 pressures in 2025. Those pressure numbers are especially important because they reflect consistent disruption even when sacks don't fully capture a player's impact. Pressure forces mistakes, speeds up quarterbacks, and creates opportunities for the rest of the defense. What stands out most is the pattern. This isn't random. Multiple edge defenders, multiple defensive line prospects, direct meetings, detailed evaluations. When an organization repeatedly focuses on a specific position group during the combine, it usually signals intent. It signals preparation. It signals that the Patriots are not satisfied with standing still. They are actively exploring options that could transform the defensive front. And when you look at the bigger picture, it raises a critical question about the direction of this roster. Are the Patriots preparing to invest their first-round pick in a defensive playmaker who can immediately elevate the pass rush? Or are these meetings simply contingency plans for moves that haven't happened yet but could reshape the roster before draft night arrives? What do you think Patriots fans should prioritize most right now? Securing a proven edge rusher early in the draft? or addressing other roster needs and trusting the current defensive core to step up next season? And that question becomes even more complicated once you look at the full scope of who the Patriots have been evaluating, because their combine meetings weren't limited to just the defensive front. There's another layer here, and it suggests the Patriots are thinking not just about immediate impact, but about protecting themselves against potential roster transitions at multiple key positions. One of the most revealing meetings came with tight end Nate Borkacher, a player who may not have eye-popping production on paper, but fits a very specific type of role that has quietly been important in this offense. In 2025, Borkacher recorded 19 receptions for 198 yards and 3 touchdowns. Those numbers alone don't jump off the page, but context matters. His ability to function as a red zone target is exactly the kind of trait that fits within the Patriots' offensive structure. The tight end position has historically played a major role in scoring efficiency, especially when quarterbacks need reliable, physical targets in tight spaces. And when you connect that evaluation to the current roster, it becomes clear why this meeting happened. There are real questions surrounding the long-term futures of players like Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper. Contract situations, cap considerations, and age curves all factor into roster planning. And the Patriots know they cannot afford to be caught unprepared if changes become necessary. Bringing in a younger tight end who can develop while contributing situationally is exactly the kind of forward-thinking move that championship LV organizations make. But even with that offensive evaluation, the center of gravity in this entire situation continues to point directly back to the edge position. And that's where the most fascinating name of all emerges: Hakeem Meador. This is where things shift from routine evaluation to something that feels much more intentional. Meador's production speaks for itself. Over the course of his time at Miami, he established himself as one of the most disruptive defenders in their entire program. In 2025 alone, he delivered 63 tackles, 17.5 tackles for loss, 12 sacks, 67 quarterback pressures, and 4 forced fumbles. Those numbers represent more than just consistency, they represent dominance. They represent the kind of player who doesn't just contribute, but actively changes the outcome of games. And what makes Meador even more interesting is his readiness. At 25 years old, he isn't viewed as a long-term development project. He's viewed as someone who can step into the NFL and contribute immediately. That distinction matters because the Patriots are not in a position where they can afford to wait multiple seasons for defensive playmakers to develop. They need production now, they need disruption now, they need players who can help accelerate the defensive unit's overall effectiveness right away. There's also a deeper connection here that cannot be ignored. Meador himself acknowledged the relationship between Miami and the Patriots organization, referencing the existing pipeline of players and personnel connected to the program. That kind of familiarity can influence evaluations, because teams often feel more confident drafting players from systems and environments they already trust. When decision-makers have first-hand experience with a program's coaching, preparation, and culture, it reduces uncertainty during the draft process. And when you start picturing Meador lining up alongside established defenders like Harold Landry, the potential impact becomes obvious. Suddenly, the Patriots' pass rush gains another explosive presence. Suddenly, opposing quarterbacks face pressure from multiple angles. Suddenly, the defensive front transforms from a question mark into a strength. At the same time, the Patriots are balancing multiple strategic possibilities. There's still the option of addressing offensive line needs. There's still the possibility of reinforcing linebacker depth. And there's always the unpredictable nature of draft night decisions, where trades and unexpected selections can completely reshape expectations. But what the combine meetings revealed more than anything is this: the Patriots are actively preparing for multiple scenarios. They are not locked into one path. They are building flexibility. They are studying players who can fill immediate roles, players who can protect against future roster losses, and players who can elevate the overall competitiveness of the team. Because ultimately, this draft is not just about adding talent, it's about defining the next phase of the Patriots' identity. It's about deciding whether they prioritize immediate defensive impact, long-term roster stability, or a balanced approach that strengthens multiple areas at once. And when you look at the intensity of their evaluations, especially at edge rusher, it strongly suggests they understand exactly how important this moment is. So now it comes down to you. If the Patriots have the opportunity to select a proven, highly productive edge rusher like Meador, someone capable of delivering pressure, sacks, and forced turnovers right away, should they commit to strengthening the defense immediately? Or should they consider using that draft capital on another position that could help Maye and the offense grow even faster? And this is where the situation becomes becomes even more critical, because what the Patriots are doing right now isn't just routine scouting. This is strategic positioning for a franchise that understands the margin between competing and falling behind in today's NFL is razor thin. Every meeting, every evaluation, every conversation at the Combine is part of a larger blueprint that is quietly unfolding behind the scenes. When you step back and look at the defensive structure of the New England Patriots, the importance of this decision becomes obvious. A dominant edge rusher changes everything. It changes how offenses call plays. It changes how quarterbacks process reads. It creates hesitation. It creates mistakes. And most importantly, it creates opportunities for the rest of the defense. When you have a player who can generate 60-plus pressures and double-digit sacks like Meador did in his final college season, you're not just drafting potential, you're drafting disruption. You're drafting fear into opposing offensive coordinators. And that's something this defense has been missing. Not effort, not discipline, but that one consistent, reliable force who can take over a game when it matters most. Someone who can end drives. Someone who can close games in the fourth quarter. Someone who doesn't need perfect conditions to make an impact. What makes this even more fascinating is how intentional the Patriots' approach has been throughout this entire process. They didn't just meet with one edge rusher, they met with multiple. Cassius Howell, Zion Young, Hakeem Meador, each one brings a different profile. Howell brings elite sack production, but raises physical measurement questions. Young brings consistent pressure, but leaves questions about finishing ability. Meador brings proven production, physical readiness, and immediate impact potential. And when a team evaluates multiple players at the same position with this level of seriousness, it tells you something. It tells you they are preparing to act. At the same time, the Patriots understand that every draft decision creates ripple effects throughout the roster. If they invest heavily in the edge position, it signals confidence in other areas. It signals belief in the current offensive development. It signals a defensive identity built around pressure and aggression. But if they pass on edge and address another position, it signals patience and long-term roster balancing. And this is the moment where front offices earn their reputation. Draft decisions like this don't just affect one season. They affect multiple seasons. They affect locker room leadership. They affect scheme flexibility. They affect the trajectory of the entire franchise. Because imagine this scenario for a second. Imagine Meador stepping onto the field in week 1. Imagine him lining up opposite Harold Landry. Imagine the Patriots suddenly generating pressure consistently without needing to rely on heavy blitzing. That changes how the entire defense operates. That changes how offensive coordinators prepare. That changes expectations. And this is why the Combine meetings matter so much. These weren't random conversations. These were calculated evaluations that could determine who becomes one of the foundational pieces of the Patriots' next era. Now, everything shifts toward draft night. The preparation is done. The evaluations are in progress. The decisions are being shaped behind closed doors. And very soon, we're going to find out which direction this franchise chooses. So now I want you to be part of this conversation. Do you believe the Patriots should make edge rusher their absolute top priority and bring in someone like Meador, who can immediately transform the defense? Or do you think the team should focus on building around Maye and strengthening the offense first? And the more you analyze the full picture, the more it feels like the Patriots are standing at a crossroads where one single decision could